Welcome to everyone. Happy to have you all here with us. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Jennifer Cannell, the NYLA president for 2020. Thank you.
I don't need any more jobs. Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NYLA's 2020 annual conference. Hashtag best virtual conference ever. Strengthening our core, the theme for this conference has been meaningful beyond anything I ever imagined. And when I saw the title of this keynote address, Disrupted but Determined, I knew we had the right keynote speaker. As our nation seems to crumble around us, it is through our core values that we have a shared sense of purpose, a guiding path, and a duty to the communities that we serve. When I became NYLA president, I had no idea the perks that came with this position. Among them, I was able to select our keynote speaker for this conference. Who better than the legendary Rebecca T. Miller? When I think of someone who has dedicated her career to helping us grow in our understanding of social responsibility, equity, intellectual freedom, sustainability, education, and lifelong learning, it is Rebecca Miller who comes to mind. Rebecca is group publisher of Library Journal, School Library Journal, and the Horn Book. Her background in libraries dates to 1998 when she joined the book review staff of Library Journal. In 2020, she was named group publisher after a 7-year tenure as editorial director of Library Journal and School Library Journal. She guides the strategy and operations for these core library brands and is deeply involved in exploring the trends affecting patrons, libraries, and the library ecosystem. Born a twin, Rebecca was raised in a large family in the West. She and her family loved to sail and travel and just completed renovating their home in Suffolk County, which has been a long-term project. One of the things I admire about Rebecca is that she brings her daughter to conference with her. I'm sorry you are not physically together for you to meet Harper. However, I heard a rumor that if you stop by the NYLA Sustainability Initiative booth, you just might catch Harper working. Way to go, Mom, raising a future library mover and shaker. Rebecca has had a profound impact on the New York library community. She is a co-creator of NYLA Sustainability Initiative and a trustee and treasurer of the Great Neck Library on Long Island. I am pleased to introduce Rebecca T. Miller as NYLA's very first virtual conference keynote presenter. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for that. And literally yesterday, we got our certificate of compliance on the building project, so that's news just in, so thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to be, quote, with you all in the NYLA community this year. And I thank you, Jen, for your leadership of the organization through this year. It's been something, right? What a year. The context here is unmistakable. We're navigating a pandemic. Who trained for this? I don't know. I know I didn't. Months ago when I agreed to this talk, which was actually at midwinter, I believe, Jeremy, I was thinking about what to title it in the summer about, and I thought disrupted but determined. We're really focused, right? We're going to keep working. But I may have been better to call it hold fast, stay true, because it's a longer problem than we thought we were going to have. So that hold fast, stay true is the motto here in Greenport, New York. And that's the town where my family and I have been riding out the pandemic since March. And it's a place I call home, while of course touching base in the Great Neck Library as a trustee, where I serve right now. And a shout out to anyone from the Great Neck Library in the audience right now. I really love being in Saratoga Springs, and I really miss being there this year. But I'm taking in silver linings where I can. And I'm pleased to be at the Floyd Memorial Library, and that's where I'm presenting from this morning. And yes, they let me in early, and I did wear a mask, and now I'm alone in a room presenting. So I just want to show you a little bit about Greenport Library. Here's the garden. It's hunkering down for winter. This was taken a couple days ago, and then I went around the front and it was really windy and dark suddenly, and the curbside had been taken inside, and inside they're running things by COVID protocols. People are coming in and browsing and then leaving, not staying for very long. And there's a remarkable art show hanging up downstairs and down the hall from where I am right now. This art show was hung up right before COVID hit. and I consider it kind of company down there. It's a show of work by two artists, Arden Scott and Megan Barron. They transformed objects that they found throughout the world and mostly on the beach and mailed them to one another over years as letters. Let's just give it okay and up, thumbs up to the post office, right? Over the years of collaboration, they found beautiful things, and it's a remarkable statement of commitment. And one of them is especially poignant for our times. This is two sides of it. One side was photocopied, so you could see how the letter mailed. There's also a really big transition to note here. Lisa Richland departs. Oh, my slide got a little skewed. Sorry about that, Lisa. She departs her tenure as the director after 31 years here, and I want to thank her for her contribution to the Long Island community here and for her openness and friendship over the years. She's been someone I've talked to about libraries, and she's been a friend. She's shown me this library over the years, and she's guided this library, and I wish her the best in retirement. We're looking forward to the arrival of Tom Vitale from Paterson, New York, and I believe he's a NYLA person. Maybe he's here, and if so, looking forward to meeting you and spending time with you and having you in our community. So as you see, time turns even in a pandemic. So here I am in the library, and I'm in the local history room. This is a spot that is really resonant for me right now because as we manage this disruption, something that's unlike anything we could have anticipated, for me, libraries are about local coherence, a well-being for everybody, and resilience. And that word resilience is a word that's really been tested. As I stand in this little room, and it's crammed, and I think it's well organized, although I haven't examined that, I think about this library. It was founded in 1907, and the building was first built in 1917. That would be pre-Depression. And I'm reflecting on how libraries help communities have a memory, right? Have a memory through it all, even as they manage and struggle through whatever they're struggling through. And they take a long, optimistic view of what success or meaning is, right? And they have to do that by making so many choices about how to focus their energy, such as, do you do this or that? Or do you focus on encouraging reading, for example? Think about what act could be more optimistic than encouraging reading. You may not, most likely will not see the outcome. But the outcome is life-changing for the person who learns to read, perhaps loves to read, and has a life enriched in so many ways by this skill that we cannot and do not take for granted. Multiply that by all the other literacies that libraries foster, the STEM labs, maker spaces, learning gardens, Zoom programming, and so many other participatory and other programs and services libraries provide. It's really something. Rooms like this help us remember that. So almost 20 years ago, when my soon-to-be husband and I were looking here in this town for a place to buy a home, that's early in my time in LJ, before I'd even thought of library school, I asked a good and fundamental question. I said, what's the library like in Greenport? And so we walked in one day, and I told a very obviously kind person behind the circ desk that we were thinking of buying a house in Greenport. And she smiled and said, well, I think that's an excellent idea. And that was Poppy Johnson. That was the librarian on staff that day. And she's the person who let me in early with permission to the library this morning. In that moment, my relationship with the Floyd Memorial Library began. And that response, I'll let you know, it did make us feel even better about the prospects of investing our little bit of money and our lives in this place. So I tell you this story today because, usually keynotes talk about their library relationships, right? But also I tell you this today because part of this time is getting face to face with things that matter, right? And something that matters is just how personal libraries can be to those who love them and use them. That profession and that precious connection is vital now and in the future, and it can help us guide the way ahead. It's personal for me, it's personal for you, of course, and it's personal for each person who uses the library. And it could be to the many people who don't or can't get to the library because we're out of reach somehow. But that's library's normal, right? In normal times, this isn't like other times. Aren't we coping with a crisis here? And I would say, yes, we are. Let's just take a second and think what we've been through, what we are experiencing here. So as the pandemic arrived in the US, we at LJ and in the magazines, we were watching, of course. And in March, the change came. By March 13th, we were pretty much working off-site. Everyone was off-site and the offices were closed in New York and Boston. We had canceled live events and we were starting to consider ramping up virtual offerings for the year, which we have done. We were, as a team and as individuals, of course, adjusting to disruption in our lives and a really intense isolation of work from home. In the midst of all of that, the team sprinted like crazy to keep up with the changing story of COVID as it impacted schools, libraries, and basically everything around us. So together, that small team, that small news team at LJ and SLJ, and Hornbook had some coverage, but I'm going to focus on the news channels here. They've delivered well over 300 articles in the COVID-19 channels on the websites from early March to today, actually, I looked yesterday. They ramped up the news coverage to do that, and they worked on covering the evolving scene, offering resources where they could, and surfacing opinions. So I'm going to show you a sampling of the headlines from those two news feeds here. And I'd like you to just, if you can, just actually read them. I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to let them be there long enough for you to read them yourselves. I'm going to try to keep my chatter down to a minimum. But it'll show you a little timeline of the changes that we've faced and the things that we grappled with. So I'm just going to have to take a second here to get my screen ready for you. Oops. Sorry, give me 1 second. Thank you for your patience. The Zoom layer is a little bit different than I expected it to be. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do this. Okay. Early March, mid-March actually at this point. So the disease came to Washington first. Libraries there were impacted first. What are we going to do about books as people go off-site? And where libraries weren't closing, people were getting scared. The call for closing libraries started. Just so you know, you can tell which brand is which, whether it's LJ or SLJ, by the color of the underline of the byline. Erica. People started helping, pitching in, figuring out how to help. And licenses started getting opened up. I guess it's not going to just be a few weeks. This is still March. Starting to feel the downside and struggling to understand what to do when we close. What exactly is going to happen with books? A lot of people took time for PD. This won't sound unusual to you. Stepping up with Wi-Fi was really important at this time. This is April 1st. So it was a big day. Every library type was impacted, trying to ramp up remote services. and the call for support was underway. Starting to really understand the disparities, the stark disparities we're seeing, and of course, misinformation about COVID. Ongoing struggle there, advocacy position. I just love that. Every library stepped in to help support workers who were laid off or furloughed. And everything becomes about the home environment. A lot of questions about what COVID means on materials, beginnings of that being answered. We're starting to see some really big furloughs. This was very popular. I think Jeremy might be using it today. The conversation about safety and reopening is really important. Of course, how to support students. We all realized we were going to be home longer, started figuring out how to do it better, and how to help our communities understand what they were experiencing. Lots of important conversations, questions. Using our skills to support the work around COVID. Of course, we all know there's so many gaps for kids in book deserts. This is people really thinking about how to deal with those physical books. How do we get them back in people's hands? And what do we do? How do we use our spaces? Now, not all of this was without controversy. This is May 15th. Really thinking about school reopenings. We know that conversation is still going on. Really important voice of all the workers in the library. Shout out to Christian. Quarantines, I just love that. Something that was already really important was school and public library partnerships. And here we go, lots of things around reopening. We're in June now, starting to really think and dig into how we reopen our spaces safely. Lots of questions. When the first realm results came through, starting to give us answers based on research. Libraries are continuing to stretch to serve their communities. And as they reopen, this June 25th, they're really struggling to balance it and do it right. Moving into the schools, thinking about the schools. And summer programming like no other, right? Academic libraries looking at real challenges. Got to spread kids out in schools. And the conversation around social justice comes into our libraries. Of course, has been for a long time. This is August and midwinter went virtual, showing us just how long we were going to be in this state. And the conversation about all safety continues. So this is August, and we're looking at virtual, reinventing the virtual again, because as we move in and out of our physical spaces. Of course, we have long learning loss to deal with. School librarians will be there. Getting creative about objects in hands, even in remote or hybrid environments, and surfacing books where we can. Of course, the conversation about budgets. This will be a long-standing things we've learned about virtually supporting learners. Advocacy work, activism within libraries makes a difference. I want to shout out to the Urban Librarians Unite conference for also going virtual. Lauren. Shout out to Rebecca. Of course, we had an election, of course, that we're dealing with as well, and libraries stepped up as usual. And more about Realm. We've gotten lots of results from Realm. It's been very important to have that. And the ongoing conversation around mental health needs. How to help students more. This extension just came through to March 31st. Now we're in November. Anybody else feel fatigued? Librarians lean in and figure out how to support their communities. All right. So thank you for looking at that with me. I feel a little exhausted, frightened. I don't know. I'm really inspired. I'm inspired by you. That timeline of our coverage, and that doesn't have like resources and other stuff. There's a lot of other coverage there. That tells a story. The headlines do. But the real story is the work that the stories are covering, and that's the work that you're doing. You're doing in your libraries, in your schools, on your campuses, and that's really important. For me and my team for the pandemic, it's meant extended work from home. We've completely reinvented the reviews process in order to do that, and we've flipped certain things. So the particulars of what we do and how we do it have shifted, and sometimes really significantly, not the why. And that anchors our choices. And with no end in sight to the work from home, we're continuing to learn about how to do that and how to collaborate, stay focused, balance work from home pressures. And that's all without the inherent benefits of face-to-face interaction. We've had to adjust, but we've learned that we can do what we do in this disrupted state. This has been challenging, but it doesn't compare to the disruption confronting libraries of all types. You had to close buildings and spaces for an indefinite period of time. That's an unprecedented shutdown of major activities and a ramp up of new activities with working from home where you could, redefining programming and outreach, and in too many places dealing with significant furloughs. And now, and through the summer, keeping people safe as you move in and out of the situation and through the situation. So one of the biggest challenges of living through an extended crisis is balancing and keeping focused in the face of bad news and potentially more bad news, and celebrating wins when you have them. But we're in a world where almost every pattern or practice, habit has been interrupted by COVID. So we celebrate differently, we mourn differently, and we grow and we change and we learn all in a different context. In this situation, we kind of wait because we want and like resolution. What's it going to look like tomorrow? When are we going to get to go back? Well, I kind of doubt we will go back. And I think maybe that's a good thing, because some definitions of resilience focus on bouncing back to a prior norm. But when problems are long problems or deep problems, resilience is really about being adaptable. It's about being capable of shaping a future by anticipating and adjusting and investing time and effort effectively to manage the forces at work towards a goal and to work towards that goal. So we're still in the middle of this disruption and will be for a long time. We don't necessarily know everything, but what do we see so far? So one thing we see is that our lives can be, and absolutely can be, disrupted and changed, transformed in a heartbeat. So in a matter of days, COVID is like a warning to us about other things that some of us have been trying to bring attention to. This kind of disruption, what did we need to know? How well have we responded? What will we do better next time? So those who live in precarious circumstances, in poverty, who experience natural disasters, things like that, they experience precariousness a lot. This is a world scale precarious situation, this crisis. And everyone's affected at the same time. And anyone who cares about anything about the world should be on high alert, because we have a fragile social and economic system. So we see also that libraries have been tested, right? You've been tested at every level. We've been tested. Great Neck Library as a trustee, of course, we've all been tested. The responsibility we carry for the public and for each other has been called on. Trustees, administrators, staff, the public, people interfacing, volunteers, we've been tested. First of all, libraries were closed. The buildings were closed. It was absolutely essential, critical to shutter the physical spaces to help to help stop the spread of COVID. We had to struggle with how to actually do it, right? It was also psychologically and from an advocacy position, really disturbing. I mean, what does it mean for a library to be closed? These treasured third places for so many people were often the sanctuaries in times of unrest or trauma. Suddenly that fundamental identity of place was challenged. It was so painful to close libraries. And to hear those words, soon I started saying things like, libraries are open, but their buildings are closed, or the buildings are closed, but the library's open. Just to not have to say the library's closed. Another thing that we see that a new meaning of open has begun to be defined. So there's really great innovation. You saw some of it in the timeline there. Library staff and services, very flexible, really adjusting. What we're gonna, at the end of it, we'll think, what do we build into services? What was just for today? But for the moment, what we see is that libraries are open and have been open by doing a bunch of things, by pivoting programming to digital first, by saying, okay, how are we going to do reference? Remote reference, same job, new tools and strategies, virtual story times, all helped by the opening of content, of course, thank you for that. And then we also saw that we were open by offering our info-lit skills elsewhere to other places that were needed, by activating maker spaces and other and STEM labs to make PPE. We were open by pitching in non-core library ways with spaces. And we were open by supporting Wi-Fi and connectivity, by boosting our own Wi-Fi in libraries and getting Wi-Fi into communities through other strategies, hotspots, repeaters, device lending. We were open internally, meanwhile, by coping and managing the displacement of work from home, getting creative about alternate projects for staff who didn't have work to do, obvious work to do at the moment. We did a bunch of calling, wellness calls, things like that, back-end projects, lots of filing, a lot of other projects as well. A lot of PD, spending time to reflect and learn things we needed to learn. Libraries were open throughout by helping to capture and archive community experience of COVID. And libraries were open by helping to understand how to reopen, digging into the results of the Realm project and thinking about how to be responsible. They were open also by reaching into where people lived and trying to get services to them. So one of the really interesting things of this time is, what does it mean when the home suddenly becomes the primary learning space, living space, working space? The home is suddenly the resource center. It is fundamentally an exciting place, right? It's exciting, it's a home library. Well, it can also be a reality check, because there are too many people without access to tools, to Wi-Fi, to digital, to books, in many instances food, and of course, to a home. Some people don't have homes. This is revealed by this process, even in more stark ways than prior. We also see and have seen that we can switch between digital and analog pretty quickly. It's not painless, but we can do it, and people will want it. So there's been a really heavy investment by many libraries into digital content during this time. And that's actually touched some and reached some patrons that we didn't have before. What are we going to do later? And of course, the conversation about ebooks continues. We also see that right now we have an immediate funding impact, but longer term we have a situation that we're going to have to manage as we move through what could be a long recession. And what will it mean when the social infrastructure, what will it mean to the social infrastructure of our country, in our world, I would say, if the key institutions we call libraries face really ongoing and deep cuts. So the case for the library as a critical tool to help the community rebuild, it'll be one that advocates should hone and deploy every step of the way. And I know that NYLA is working on that, and a lot of people here are already. Basically, we have a lot of work to do. We're probably going to have less resource to do it with. Some places are going to realize that the library is essential to spearheading a recovery. Some places get it. We had really good turnout and results on the library elections this week, a lot of places. So some places get it, some people don't. Yet, I would say, I'll be an optimist. So it's a catch-22. Of course, often in downturns, library use goes up, support for libraries goes down. What are you going to do? And compounds anxiety about how to progress our services. So next, I would say one thing that we're seeing is that libraries, they can be part of the problem, right? Where the impacts of COVID-19 collided or combined with the widespread protests and calls for social justice we've seen this summer, that reckoning with racism in our community, work towards a more anti-racist society, where that collided, the context of the EDI work that we've been doing in libraries and prioritizing in libraries kind of came up and became a more important conversation, intensified, radically intensified. And it showed that we still have really important internal work to do. We had an urgent focus on staff well-being and safety, and that helped us see that we still need to work on this. That library opening, that awareness that the staff didn't feel safe, they didn't feel protected, they didn't feel listened to, and the precarious staffers were most impacted. There was also the issue of like, what does policing mean in our libraries when policing can be such a negative experience for so many if someone chooses not to wear a mask, for instance. Those things started to collide as we thought about reopening and moved towards reopening. It's really, really challenging, and activism and building awareness within library systems, as we saw in some of the headlines, but this has been a really significant force of change in some places. That is an intensification of a conversation we've already been having in libraries. It's really important. But libraries are usually celebrated for being there for their communities around social justice and other things. And in this situation, libraries, it became clear that libraries too can be part of the problem. That came to the fore. So we also see that our society is being consumed by misinformation. This is not going to surprise anyone here. If it does, let's talk. So fake news, of course, is a big issue, but the stakes have never, sometimes it's not clear that the stakes are high, but here, the false narrative around COVID-19 has made it clear that good information can literally mean life and death, and bad information threatens today and it threatens the future. Now, of course, libraries are all about information. Our society needs good information. We need to know how to use it and how to know it is good information. And this is true right now, but also as it relates to longer term resilience in light of all of the forces that are still coming, right? You know, all of what we're dealing with today, we still have climate change. We still have all the other problems that we had. We need good information. And we see that our communities, so one other thing we've seen is that our community's resilience is being tested, broadly tested. That the economic downturn today will be lasting for years. And how will libraries help our communities cope when they're really struggling to bounce back? Because the divides that we knew about pre-COVID have been both revealed to be so and exacerbated by the disease, the shutdown, and the economic hit. So how are we going to reconcile these truths? And it's important to remember that and ask the question, and I think I have the answer. Can a community be truly resilient if it's torn by social injustice and racism and other bias and inequities? But we have a responsibility to realize work and progress in these directions and in small and large ways. So that's a whole bunch of really heavy duty stuff, and it is. So what do we do now? I mean, really, it's hard. So I would ask you to remember that libraries are the ultimate shared resource in our communities. They are absolutely there for their community well-beings. Your work, the work of every library, represents critical social infrastructure. You are beloved. Beloved. Libraries are beloved. And right now, really deeply missed by a lot of people. So right now might be a hard time to think about really future think. We need to just be in today. So right now we need good management, we need action, we need support. And we'll apply the lessons as we go, right? We'll learn as we go. For now, I would encourage you to do what you do best. Do that library work, right? Apply the core, and this library conference is themed around the core. Apply the core to the changing dynamics as the pandemic evolves. And make sure you tell people about it, of course. Think about keeping staff and public safe every step of the way, of course. And think about that. As you think about that, think about who's participating in the decision-making and make sure everyone has a voice. What can you do? Give information to your communities and double down on information literacy initiatives, fighting misinformation, building multiple literacies where you can, and I would say helping to create context around questions that are complex or persistent issues in a community. Something you can do is supporting a workforce internally that has its lives arrested by COVID and continuing to evolve your outreach. These are all things you're already doing. So I'm telling you to do what you do, and I'm trying to help you see where you're already doing it and helping support those without homes, of course. And to keep thinking about how to build that community connection. What is the third place is going to look like? What can it look like now? How do we keep that connection with our communities? Of course, advocate in the context of the moment we're in. Show people that they need this resource because our cities and towns, schools and campuses, they need libraries and they will continue to. And use partnering to do that. I think really importantly, think about how to help our communities heal and move forward on the social justice front. And this begins with our institutions. This is an inward confrontation and consideration of policy and practice, hiring, advancement, and recruitment of people for our teams. I would say it then also is about evaluating the range and the depth of what we have in our libraries. Of course, there's diversity audits of collections, as well as like, what does a local history room hold? What histories? Ask that question. And then in the effort to heal, that extends outward with programming and other things, conversations about, say, statues in your community, paintings, and kind of mining information, using information and perspectives to expand the understandings of the past. And where you can, foster reconciliation skills and the reconciliation of the community. So every community that libraries serve is affected by racism and other drivers of systemic inequity. That makes addressing this inherently a library problem and a library opportunity. It's for our communities, but also for libraries. So we have an opportunity to embrace that momentum to move more rapidly toward an anti-racist society, one that's truly inclusive, with less economic disparity, one that has equitable access to a thriving future. People need information to act, to be empowered, to be able to speak to this in courageous conversations, as Patrice Cullors said at the SLJ Summit, one of the Black Lives Matters founders. So this may not be clear cut. I don't think it necessarily is. We have seen examples where pushback from communities have a chilling effect on communicating the mission alignment with these core principles, these values. That we have to remember that these are not inherently political things. They get politicized. They are also inherently political in some ways. It's a complex conversation. But how do you show someone that disagrees with the library, with that library value, that it still is a significant important one, and that that resource is still also there for them to use? It's very complicated. So someone once asked me what a library is, and I answered that it is anywhere or any when or any how the work of library happens. I don't know, it was a big one. Basically, I meant that it is space independent, but is mission aligned. It's really all about the why, delivering on the why, and not necessarily just the things of libraries. So in this work, I would say, you are protecting the future. You should know that. And you should know that your actions of getting resources of all types into your patrons' hands will reap benefits down the line. And I urge you to continue to plant the seeds the future will need, book by book, source by source, driving information literacy, supporting information-rich lives, fostering social cohesion, especially through the hard stuff. If you do the work of libraries, our communities, our world will be stronger for it, as will our libraries. So it sounds like a lot, but it's actually what you're doing now. You have done it. You know it inside and out. It's just a lot harder to pull it off each day when life is upended and the crisis is on. So out here in Greenport, we have the luxury of outdoor spaces. And I just want to show you something. One moment, I'm going to share my screen. Hold with me, please. All right. So I walk out in this place from time to time, not as nearly as often as I should, because one has to get out of the house. And this is in Orient Point. And this is a place where I have walked lots of times. It's a park, it's a shared resource. And one day I was struck by this tree. I wasn't actually struck by it. I was struck by looking at it. And we have so many challenges we're looking at, and I saw it. I feel like I saw this tree for the first time. It's on the north side. There's a north wind blowing it all the time. It's really uncomfortable. This tree is super uncomfortable, but I found it really beautiful. And then I was like, no, it's so isolated. And I thought, oh, wow. So then I backed up and I saw that it was, of course, part of a coastal forest of some sort. It's shaped by place and time, by its drive to do what it needs to do to survive. And it's still really uncomfortable, but it's really quite lovely. And certainly not so lonely, because of course it's part of an ecosystem, because we're in this together. And as one people on one earth, we are in this together. And the pandemic shows that like no time before. And we have so much to work for. So I would thank you for being there for your communities, for each other, and for the future. And I would encourage you to hold fast and stay true. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Realizing that you are being robbed of the ovation that you so much deserve and would be happening if the 430 of us were all crammed into a convention center room. So I accept the applause that's popping up into the chat window. So we have a little bit of time left on the session, and what I'd like to do is do our best to replicate the in-person experience. And in order to do that, we can take questions from the audience. I will be doing my best to keep an eye on the chat. Lots of thank yous flying by, so I'll do my best there. And also, if you'd like to, we're going to try this out, figure it out together. But if you raise your hand in Zoom, which if you're on the conference site, you'll click on the three dots for more, turn on the participants, click participants, and then you'll see the button to raise your hand. And I'll be able to unmute your mic, and you can present your question live on audio. So many thank yous, Rebecca. So many and so many applause emojis. So
That's good. That's fine. It's a pleasure.
While people are figuring out how to find that button to raise their hands or type in their questions into the chat, I will remind you that on the platform, you can click the Sessions tab and find the NYLA annual membership meeting. That'll be kicking off at 11 o'clock. And invite you to also click the exhibit hall and visit our sponsors for today's and tomorrow's events. I do have a question for you from Jill Hurst-Wall from formerly Syracuse University. What stories, I'm going to guess that's, do they have planned to tell, what stories do they have to tell, the stories of these last few months? So yeah, do you have any, great stories that you've kind of archived away that you're planning on using as a go-to?
So this is a very fast-moving situation, and I would say that the main thing that we're doing is that we're in active research mode. You'll see that SLJ has a series of surveys that have gone out over time, and that the new issue that's about to hit has a lot of feedback from that and showing you basically what's happening. There will be a time, I think, where we look back and say these were the really fundamental important shifts that happened. But I do think that it might be a little early to say this is something that's fundamentally always going to be different. Instead, we're kind of tracking this time and tracking what's happening. And of course, we have really big questions about what the long-term impacts are going to be around all kinds of things, including layoffs and furloughs and budgets, and how we're going to respond to that. And I think obviously we're going to see a faster impact in places where there's really clear attachment to tax revenues. And we've seen that in cities where libraries are tied to city budgets, where there's independent taxing districts and where people have votes that, where they vote on their budget each year. That's going to be perhaps a slower impact, and maybe there won't need to be an impact, but I think that we're basically going to see a struggle down the line. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like at this point, and I would not dare to say that I do, but it's a big one. I think Claudia has her hand up. Uh-oh, you're muted, Jeremy.
Claudia, I think you have a hot mic if you want to ask a question.
We're just learning as we go, every step
We
of the way.
We are. I see Ali Mercado has a question too. I'm going to see if that works.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Ali, go ahead.
Good morning, Jeremy and Rebecca. So Rebecca, as you were finishing up your talk, you were talking about protecting the future. So my mind goes to people who might be thinking about going to library school, students who are in library school. So what would you say to them as, the job market might be looking bleak to them? What words of encouragement might you have to encourage them to sort of persevere to protect our future?
So I think that's a great question. I think that we can't tell people there are jobs that there aren't going to be or anything like that, but there will be library work and there will be library jobs. And it's very important that we have passionate people in the field, people who want to be in this work. And libraries have had people working in them for a long time. So I would encourage them to take the long view, see that the libraries are there. And if they really want to do the work to invest this time in getting their training and getting perspective about the field and learning deeply. I think we have to wait and see what's going to happen to some extent, but I am very confident that libraries will be here and working hard for our communities, and that we will have talented people in them. And it's really important that that be from a broad base of our community, and that they be encouraged to see that it's a career path, and hopefully a career path that actually they can subsist on, because we know that library pay is very low in too many places already. It's not much of an answer. Sorry, I don't know exactly. But
well, thank you, Rebecca, and good morning from Suffolk County.
Thank you. Nice to see you, kind of.
And Ali, you were spot on, because it was a question was also asked. The same question was asked in the chat. So thank you for getting that to the forefront. Claudia, I got your mic open again. Let's try that one again. No. Okay.
Claudia, email me.
You're right. Yeah, or if you want to drop it in the chat,
Right.
we'll take a look there. Okay, I do see another question in the chat, Rebecca, from Ken Bellafor from the Freeport Memorial Library. As we anticipate the next shutdown, how do we work to make our staff feel secure?
I think that we need to be really paying attention to safety for everyone, our staff and our public and anybody that we interact with. This is obviously very serious for every single individual in their private lives, and anyone who is responsible for a space of any kind. I think this has been alarming that we have as little safety in some places as we do. And we should be controlling our environments as much as possible. And if that means not being in them for some period of time, we should go back to doing that if we have to, of course. Ideally, though, we should be focusing on how to create protocols that everyone agrees to, everyone knows about, and everyone practices, and that those protocols are as conservative as we can make them to make sure everyone stays safe. So if something breaks down, there's redundancy in the protocol, and so that people are as safe as possible. We need to hear what people are experiencing from library workers, frontline people, anybody who's interacting with public, anyone who's running into each other in library spaces where they didn't expect to. We need to, I would say that it's the same for anyone managing a space right now that has people interacting. You have to really be making sure that people are safe. And that, and of course, as we learn more about COVID, sometimes we might have to change what we're doing.
Absolutely, definitions seem to be in flux right now. I want to, Jim Neal never wanted for another great question. Threw another one for us in the chat. As we face unclear political conditions in DC, are there policies that you think we should be particularly monitoring?
Lots of them. You know better than I do, Jim, but I would say that we really need to be thinking about things that support digital infrastructure, things that allow people to have access to all to resources that are shared resources. So we have these buildings, we have this infrastructure that is a shared resource. How do we make sure that people actually can get to that, or it can get to them? And of course, how do we help support education, all this distance learning? We have lots of issues around our digital infrastructure and access that we've been working on in libraries for a long time on the policy front. I think that we obviously have to be looking at things like, supporting and fueling libraries, fueling these resources. And yes, I see Jim's comment there. Yeah, I see some comments and not others. So I think that that's really important. Obviously, I think it's really important to be working on information freedom in a sense, like getting people to be able to have access to information, continue to support net neutrality, trying to get, supporting net neutrality, having it so that we have, that information highway open. It's really important. And, all kinds of things around sort of how we treat people. We need to make sure that people are treated right, no matter what their background are. race or anything else. And that can't be challenged at the highest levels. We have to support that. That's just a short list, but.
Indeed, yeah, it's a long list. Another question from Lisa Cooper from the Queens Library. The pandemic results or may result in more budget cuts. Yet the libraries will still need to be counted on for a level of service that we've been talking about. How do you reconcile how libraries are affected with this level of service in light of potential budget reductions?
That's the $1 million question, the $1 billion question. I think that, and it's not an unknown struggle. So libraries have often and long-term struggled with multiple priorities and not enough resource. I think I've written in the past that I don't know of a single library, even the most well-resourced library, can do more and would do more if they had more resource. So I think that it's really important for those that are dealing with really deep cuts, and there may be, and there are in some places already, to really prioritize, figure out where you can have the most impact with the resources that you do have, and partner to do the rest that you can't do, or parts of it, figure out inroads to plant seeds for when resources start coming back, and accept that you can't do everything. I think that it's really challenging for those of us in this field in times to say, I can't get to that problem that I think is so significant. And so that's a management problem, it's a priority problem, it's a vision problem in terms of mission alignment from a board level or from a leadership level that should be supported by staff conversation, public conversation. But at some point, some stuff does have to give, of course. And I think that there can be a push me pull you in libraries. I think we talk about it a lot, where suddenly it's about libraries doing more, always doing more, always doing more with the same or less resources. And you got to call uncle on that, and you got to ask for more or make the case for more. And if you can't do it, you have to not do it, because you can't do it badly.
Indeed. And NYLA president, who introduced us at the top of the hour, has a question for you as well.
Sure.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm glad that you talked about libraries being part of the problem, not just the solution, because I do think that there are times when we don't necessarily take ownership for some of the things that we're doing. What are some effective ways that NYLA might be able to help address the problems that we're creating in our own libraries?
Oh, I think that NYLA is really well positioned to help support this conversation where it may not be obvious for individual libraries where to start. They, if someone doesn't think about it or have a rubric or a structure for doing this kind of self-examination. So NYLA could support that by driving the conversation, by asking the questions, and by sort of doing it for NYLA too, right? Like NYLA's an organization as well. Every organization is an organization. And modeling this inquiry and modeling the challenge, and then helping people see how to look at their policies, how to use the trustee handbook, perhaps, Rebecca and Jared, maybe look at how to support trustee work towards this as well, give that guidance into that layer. I know that, really digging into policy and how policy can kind of create things that you don't have sort of unintended consequences can be really important. But NYLA as a guiding body of the libraries in this state and a leader in the nation, I would say should and could really be sort of a proactive thought leader about this by pulling together people from the NYLA community who want to have that conversation and sort of co-create around that. We've seen co-creation be really productive around the SI, the Sustainability Initiative, and we know that it can be a great way to approach really hard questions that shouldn't be, that you have to grapple with, and that shouldn't be top down. This needs to be a community conversation.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. And I want to just give voice to a couple of folks that had just put some comments that I just want to share with you in the chat. Debbie Engelhart had commented, "I appreciate the opportunity you've given us to reflect together on this long and challenging professional and personal journey, and one that continues. We've achieved so much for so many and will continue to grow in the ways that our community needs."
Thank you.
And Tony from Port Washington Library, with all the misinformation that is continually being disseminated from so many sources, we must continue to be the source of authoritativeness and truth. And Susan from the Phoenicia Library, the work we've been doing during the pandemic may be the least visible to our community, especially to offline patrons. We may need support to avoid budget cuts. What can we do?
I think this is really important because, of course, we have a society that has an analog reality, live visits to the library, but they may not be on social media. They may not get our emails. They may not do that. Jeremy, you're frozen. I'm concerned that I'm not on anymore. Am I on? Okay, good. So I think that the issue is not to depend on one channel of communication, obviously, and to educate across channels about what you're doing. So if you know that someone is primarily a print user, for instance, who hasn't been able to have access to print during this whole time, or just started curbside just out there, how do you get to them so they know it's there? And then how do you describe to your funding bodies, depending, and if it's your voters, what you've done all this time? Don't take it for granted that they're gonna know. Make sure you're telling that story. Make sure, and kind of tell it more times than you want to, right? Just keep doing it, and don't just say items, but talk about it in the context as well where you can, sort of tell the story of what the library has been doing through this time. And don't be worried about telling it more than once. Of course, if you can find examples and use and have people share their stories of how the library's helped them during that time, those are very powerful stories. That's not the library telling the story, that's someone who's been affected by the library telling that story. And use data where you can. Use, we know we don't always have great data or great use of impact knowledge, but we try. And I think wherever you can tell the story in rich and deep ways, please do, and think about that and tell it in the context of the time, right? And tell it throughout the experience, not just once, not just twice.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to thank everyone for their participation. We're all figuring this out together and doing this for the first time, like so many things in 2020. I thank Rebecca so very much for the thoughtful remarks and words. It really was inspiring. And thank you for kicking us off in such fine fashion. And thanks to Jen Cannell for bringing this together and making that happen as well.